Hi guys, today we're going to do some foam gun tests. And it's not going to be like every other YouTuber where they just throw their standard dilution in and spray it around and see whether it foams or not. We're actually going to use some math, and we're going to determine the amount of dilution that each of these cannons has internally. Here's how this is going to work. We're going to take a cannon like this. I'm going to put a set amount of water in it, and I'm going to run it until this is out of water, and we're going to see how much this cannon itself is actually diluting what is in the bottle. Because I'm seeing a lot of these tests from different YouTubers or different people, reviewers, whatever you want to call them, and they're saying, oh, this cannon is great, this cannon is not, this cannon was better than this cannon. But a lot of times they are simply doing the same dilution that they've always done. They're taking, GSF, 100 milliliters, and they're filling it up with water to the 1,000 milliliter mark, and they're running it and seeing how it foams. And they do that in this cannon, this cannon, this cannon, this cannon, this cannon, and they get different results in every cannon. And the assumption is that the problem is the cannon, right? That's kind of the takeaway that a lot of reviewers give in the videos, or at least that a viewer would get from that video, right? My guess, my hypothesis, is that none of these tell you on their website, hey, internally we dilute 1 to 10, or internally we dilute 1 to 15, 1 to 50, 1 to 80, whatever it is. Most of them seem to be around 1 to 10 in my experience in using them, but I don't know for sure, right? I am going to add some water to all of these. I'm going to run them. I'm going to make sure that they are nice and cleaned out. And I'm going to put 500 milliliters of water in each one of these. Then I'm going to spray them into a bucket until they run out of liquid inside the cannon. At that point, I'm going to stop the test. I'm going to measure the weight of the bucket so we can determine the amount of water that is inside the bucket. And then we're going to see, well, this was 500 ml, and now we have 5,000 ml, and we've got a 1 to 9 dilution ratio from this particular cannon, or whatever it ends up being. And we're going to see what those are. Then, when we're done, we can make custom dilutions for each of these with the same soap, where the output is the same dilution, and see how do they actually foam compared to each other. And I'm doing this, it's kind of timely. I don't have the active foam cannon, but I'm doing this because the active foam cannon is out, it's new, and everybody's talking about foam cannons again. Just like every time a new foam cannon gets released, you see dozens of videos. It happened with the MJJC-S, it's happening now with the active, it'll happen with the next one that comes out as well. Maybe the MJJC3, which they told us was going to be out in a couple months, a year ago. So we're going to try to keep this as scientific as possible. We're going to try to be as reasonable as possible. So I've got 5 different foam cannons just to go left to right. This is the cheapest foam cannon that I could find on Amazon. It's a soap rinse. It's like 20 bucks. This is the MJJC Foam Cannon S version 3. This is the MTM PF 22.2. This is the MJJC Foam Cannon Pro. This is the Action Products foam cannon. And this is the Griot's Garage Boss foam cannon. And this is I'm just gonna be honest, this is my favorite cannon. In terms of these cannons, the MJJCs were both given to me for free. Everything else that was here I bought. This came as part of a glove box. This I bought years ago. This I've now had for about a year. And the soap rinse I got a long time ago as well, maybe a year and a half. I don't really care or not care if one of them does better or worse than the others. I'm just interested in doing an objective test, and I think that there's too many variables at play in a lot of the videos that I've seen to draw good conclusions. So, first things first, I'm gonna get some water. We're going to dump these out, we're gonna spray them out, we're gonna make sure they're nice and clean, and then we'll start going from there. I cleaned the bottle out, as you can see, it's got clean water. We're gonna spray it until the water's clear. That way we know we have no soap in the head. We've got a nice, fair comparison. So our soap rinse is ready to go. Now let's repeat with the rest of them. Griot's Garage. gonna dry this off, be as good as we can be. So water weighs 1 gram per milliliter. I'm gonna put 500 in here. We've got the scale here to help us out. Okay, so we're starting off. So we've got 500 grams of water. So we've got this zeroed out, the bucket empty. 0 grams. Let's take this, and we're going to spray this in here until we're out of water. Inside the cannon. So on that part, you're gonna have to trust me a little bit because you can't see. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna press the hold button. We're gonna lift this up, and I got 6634 grams. So MJJCS got 6634 grams. So that would work out to 6.6 liters of water. If we look at our measurements on the side, I'd say that that's probably pretty accurate. Can take off our hold. Let's put it back on. Let's make sure that we get the same number the second time. .6640. Okay, so I would say our number is accurate, or about as accurate as we can reason. Sorry, camera went dead. So we found the foam cannon S diluted inside the cannon, about 12:1. It's pretty interesting. So we'll do it again. This is going to be the foam cannon C Pro. So again, we'll do 500 grams of water. And I mean, I'm just doing 500 because it's like, it's half a cannon, so I don't have to end up with, you know, like 4 gallons of water in my other bucket. But also, it's a large enough amount that I would say the results are probably fairly accurate, but small enough that I don't have to use a ton of water to make this happen, because I am pulling from a tank. And this too, I'm trying to get to that exact 500 mark. But realistically, I could just type 502 in my spreadsheet because the math is based on that. So there's 500. Screw this on, and we'll keep testing. So, zero this scale out. Okay. That's at 0. And then I didn't realize that my camera went dead, and I tested the griots. I'll give you the numbers for that in a minute. So I'm watching the bottom of the cannon to see like when I actually empty it, but there's also a sound change that occurs. 6710. Test it a second time just to be sure. 6720. Okay. And now we'll go on to the MTM. $57.88. 5790. I want to test if the filter makes a difference. So I took my oldest Canon, which is this one, and I replaced the filter in it. So we'll see if the number changes. I've always wondered how much the metering tips add. So let's test this out. In this case, I have 200 in here because I don't want to overfill the bucket. All right, well, take 3 of this. So let's discuss the results. So we ran through 6 foam cannons: Action Products, MJGC-S, MJGC Pro, Griots, Soap Rinse, MTM. And I actually saw a pretty wild disparity between the one that dilutes the most, which is the MTM at 15.6 to 1, and the Action Products, which dilutes the least at 10.58 to 1. What this tells me is that when we're testing these foam cannons, we're actually not necessarily having a direct comparison, right? Because we're usually looking at the amount of foam that's being produced, the thickness of the foam, how it falls off the car, the fan, what the spray pattern looks like. If the Action Products is using 1.5 times the product that the MTM is using, of course it's going to have thicker foam. Like, that just makes sense. It's a pretty big number. I've kind of just maintained in my head, for the last 5 years, that all foam cannons dilute approximately 10 to 1, but I'd never really tested it. And the results are fairly interesting. So I put a spreadsheet together here. We can kind of go over it and I can explain the results. I'll throw a link to this down below in some capacity. So here are my test results. If we just look at these here. So in total, we had 500 milliliters in our bottle to start. We collected 5.788, which means 5.288 was water, and we had a dilution of approximately 10.5 to 1 in the Action. Similar numbers, MJJC was 12.27 to 1, the Pro was 12.44, so those two are pretty consistent with each other. The Griots, the Soap Rinse, and the MTM were all around the 15 to 1 range. So we collected almost 8 liters of water with the Griots and a little over 8 liters of water with the Soap Rinse and the MTM. So these were the result dilutions that you get from the bottle. So assuming that you fill the bottle up with 100% soap, this is the dilution that would come out of the nozzle. Then I decided, well, if I wanted to make like a dilution calculator to determine how much product to put into these foam cannons to do proper A to B tests, so I added these two at the top. There's total volume and target dilution. So let's say you're going to do 1 liter in each foam cannon, or you're going to do 500 milliliters in a foam cannon, right? Because maybe you don't want to waste a bunch of product. And your target dilution is 100 to 1, which is what GSF calls for. That's what Koshchemy says on the bottle. So in order to have a dilution of 100 to 1 in a full foam cannon, 1,000 milliliters, you would actually put 95 milliliters of soap in the Action Products, and you would put 135 milliliters of soap in the MTM. Because the Action Product sucks so much more soap from the bottle per the amount of water that's coming out of it, your panel impact ratio would actually result in the same number. The same amount of soap will actually be hitting the panel with this amount being added to the bottle. So this is how much soap would be needed. This is how much water would be needed. And then I added a column over here for PIR and I put neat. So PIR stands for panel impact ratio, and this would be the, we'll say, native panel impact ratio that's just coming out of the cannon. So let's say you're running built handboard touchless and you're shooting for a PIR of 0.02. Well, then you would use a teal tip Griots is actually going to be almost perfect. 0.02 is going to be the PIR, and you just run it straight. You don't have to dilute it at all. The pink is going to be a little under at 0.017. But if you, like the MTM, is going to have a PIR of 0.06. So if you did 1/3 of touchless and 2/3 water, you would end up with your 0.02, right? One third of 0.06 is 0.02, right? What does this mean? Well, I think that some of the foam cannon tests that we've been doing for a long time, where we're A to B testing two different cannons, is probably inaccurate, or probably based on a false premise that all of the cannons are doing the same thing and doing it the same way with the same amount of dilution. So, you know, if you're testing something like an MJJC foam cannon S against an MTM, the foam cannon S is going to produce more foam. Why? Because it's sucking more soap, period. If you put the same mixture in both bottles, the S is going to send more soap out of the cannon to hit your car than the MTM will. So based on that, it's going to have thicker soap. It's going to be more like shaving cream and less runny. It's just going to be that way. And this isn't designed to like discredit anybody or to say that anybody's results that they've had in testing and those types of things weren't valid. But it's just a variable that I really hadn't considered up until now. And I decided to test for it today, and I'm pretty interested by the results. Wasn't sure if I was going to make a video on this. I was going to record it anyway, but I think that I'll definitely release this. So there are some variables that come into play that could change the results. Potentially temperature, potentially line pressure behind your pressure washer, potentially the pressure washer that you're using. I'm using a Krenzla K1322. I did try to make everything as even as possible. I used a K1322 for all of the tests. I draw from a tank, so I don't have line pressure behind my pressure washer to increase or decrease the amount that's coming out of it. All of my foam cannons are running a 1.25 orifice. My temperature was the same throughout my testing, and the water that I was using was all at room temperature. It's been in my garage here. It's, you know, we're 70 and sunny today. I thought that the filter might be able to change it quite a bit. So in my MTM cannon, which is my oldest cannon, I've had that for almost 5 years, and it's running the original filter. I decided to change the filter out. So this is my original filter. I changed this out for a brand new one, and I saw a change of 0.3%. So 0.3%. So it's definitely not enough to actually make a difference here. Now, if my filter was clogged, it probably would be. But in my case, you know, clean filter to clean filter, that tells me that my other foam cannons are going to be fine as well, and changing the filters in those likely won't have much of a change. And that all tracks because I use DI water in my tank, and I run DI water through my pressure washer, so everything that hits my foam cannons is DI water. So generally my filters and screens stay pretty clean. You know, this is a 5-year-old screen. This is the original in the MTM, and it still looks pretty good. So I went from, on the MTM, I went from 83.18 total collected to 82.92 total collected. So pretty insignificant difference. I have the active cannon on order. That will be here at some point soon, and I will test and add that here. I'll just do a short video on that one, in particular, testing it and seeing how it works. I'm interested in how this performs from cannon to cannon. I truly don't know. Like my MTM and a different MTM might be completely different. I truly have no idea because I only have one of each of these cannons here. I don't know how consistent the manufacturing is from device to device. I don't know how consistent the orifices are from device to device. It's also possible that the viscosity of the liquid would change the results a little bit as well. Now, that being said, I would say most of our things we're diluting pretty heavily. You know, we're doing like a 10-to-1, maybe even a 20-to-1 in the cannon, depending on the soap and the manufacturer's recommendations. So we usually end up with a pretty similar viscosity, like pretty close to water when we're putting soap in and actually like diluting it. But that is something that could change it as well. My guess is that that would be consistent across the board. So, you know, if increasing the viscosity, if using something like GSF reduced the performance by 8% on one cannon, I would assume that it's going to reduce it by 8% on the others, but I truly don't know. So that would be another thing to test. That would be pretty interesting. So yeah, I'm going to talk to a couple of the guys that I know and see if they can test their cannons out and see what kind of numbers they get. I don't know how it would vary with different pressure washers. You know, if you have something that's pretty similar to my Krenzla, like in the 1.8 to 2.0 gallons per minute range where you're running like a 1.25 orifice, I would expect your results are going to be pretty similar, but they might be different. You know, and obviously, like if you go up to a 1.5, I don't know how all of the cannons deal with that. If some can deal with it better than others, if some start to choke in one way or another, like these would be interesting things to test. If you're going to test foam cannons against each other as an A to B, and you're going to test, for example, the MJJC foam cannon S against the MTM, well, you need to put 109 milliliters of product in the MJJC to 135 in the MTM. You know, almost 20% more in the MTM to have the same result coming out of the nozzle and actually hitting your car. So, anyway, thank you for watching today. I hope this didn't bore you to sleep, and we'll play around with some of these things in the future.